But here, I would like to also say something personal. I'm Orthodox. Why? Simply because I live in an Orthodox environment, among a people traditionally Orthodox. I was raised by my Orthodox grandmother, and she would take me to the Orthodox church. That's why. But when I was already a priest serving as a priest, I was a little over 30 years old. The question arose in me. That is, my reasons for being Orthodox were purely human. But that doesn't mean it's the truth. And that shocked me. And it was very hard for me. I suffered greatly because of it. Why? Because, on one hand, I serve in an Orthodox church. As an Orthodox priest, I must preach orthodoxy, the Orthodox teaching. But now I had my doubts myself. But this was God's providence, and for the good. Why? Because I could not remain in that state for long. I had to find myself as soon as possible, so as not to deceive people, not to lead them into a dead end, into some kind of nowhere. Now I understood the responsibility for people, and that pushed me, and I began to search for an answer. It's hard for me to say the exact day and hour when the answer came. It came gradually, growing stronger, and at some moment I said to myself, how wonderful that I am Orthodox. And the next step toward the icons. Lord, thank you that I did not seek you. You found me. What blessing. Therefore, on one hand, through the prism of my own experience, I understand very well the inner conflict, which, with God's help, I managed to endure, and I understand the questions of others. At the same time, I must note, this conflict or crisis is salvific. If we take the stories of the great ones in the Bible, Abraham, the friend of God, he too experienced such a crisis. The Lord appears to him, speaks to him at an age, a respectable, mature age. Leave the house of your father, the graves of your ancestors, everything you live by, and go where I tell you. And he went. He trusted the Lord, not knowing him, not knowing God. And he was able to become the forefather of the people of Israel, who became the doorway of all nations, for all nations of the world to salvation. If we take Moses, the Lord also put him before such a choice. He was forced to flee the Pharaoh's palace after standing up for his fellow countrymen, ending up in the wilderness in a foreign land, in the family of a priest of Midian, as the Bible says. And there, when the Lord appeared to him in the burning bush, in the bush that did not burn up, he asked, "Who are you? Who is that speaks with me?" He did not know with whom he was speaking. And the Lord said, "I am the one who is." This is very powerful, of course. If we take the Apostle Paul, Peter, and so on, we see the crisis they endured, which made them into men. We know them as the lights of the church. Therefore, the very fact that one of us has such a question arise, that is already a blessing, already a manifestation of God's mercy toward us. It means the Lord wants you to see the true light. That is already a blessing, first. Second, of course, the most important thing is not only logical reasoning, but also experience. You can talk a lot about how to bake a pie, about what qualities it has in taste, but you can also say nothing. Just try it, silently, and you will like it so much that later you will want to taste more and more of it. Therefore, experience. The main thing is experience. If I speak from experience, I always struck by the following. In this life, I had to communicate with sincerely believing Muslims, with sincerely believing Baptists, Adventists, people of different religions, who very seriously and not superficially profess their faith. What always struck me about this, despite their sincerity, their kindness, and there's indeed something to respect in these people. And not only respect, but more than that, you want to love them for their sincerity. But when I talked with them, and I say this from my personal experience, I never felt depth. Everything was somehow superficial things. The depth of spiritual life, the depth of the human spirit, the inner struggle, the movement of human will, the kind of depth I either read about in the Holy Fathers or experience firsthand in communication with spirit-bearing people. I never saw it in anyone else, ever. And for me, it has always been like this. When I talk with very serious, sincere people, but of another faith. I recall my childhood. We had a television, unfortunately a television, black and white. When the color TV appeared, even if some had good in black and white one, They were set aside. The picture was entirely different, the depth different, the beauty different. This is something like what I experience when I touch the spiritual experience of Orthodoxy in the works of the saints and through living contact with great people of true holy life. After all that, everything else becomes black and white. I'll give one example, very external, not very spiritual, but illustrative. The merciful Lord, about 2, maybe I'm mistaken, 3 years ago, I think 2 years ago, granted me the blessing to visit our Orthodox hermit monks in the Caucasus. And we talk with them. I won't talk about what, but I tell something parallel. 2 observations I made. I was speaking with one hermit, and I saw with what love he welcomed us, what he prepared. Everything was very simple, but he dedicated much time to it. He himself doesn't eat like that. He strove to show us hospitality, to please us. And he did it sincerely, but I saw his eyes. I saw in his eyes that he was doing it through effort. He received us with great love, but through effort. Silence. Not just silence from human life, but at the same time accompanying it, the inner silence of feelings, the inner blessed peace that cannot remain unshaken when he is not alone. That was heavy for him. He was losing something in this, but he sacrificed himself for us, for the love of Christ. But his eyes said that it was better for him to be with God than with us, and we kind of interfered with that. Though you could see, he strove to remain in the Jesus prayer, and we felt that. I felt it. And we said, we were leaving. We had received that we wanted. We were leaving. Outwardly, again, he said, maybe you'd like to eat something else. But inwardly, I saw in his eyes, it was like an exhale. Now they will leave, and he will re-enter that blessing world in which he always abides. Such blessed inner peace I have never seen, not even among Orthodox. Maybe they exist, but I've never met them, and for me that was very powerful. And when we were leaving the place, getting into the car, I was struck by this. In the Caucasus, the mountains, the forest, and there were so many birds, insects, trees, the wind moving, the rustle of leaves, insects chirping, birds singing, like in any place in nature, everywhere. When we were going in, I didn't pay attention, but when leaving, thinking about what I had experienced, I suddenly noticed that I hadn't noticed when I entered. I was struck by the silence, not only within his soul, but even the nature around him. What silence? I looked closely at the trees and couldn't understand. There was some light breeze, but the leaves weren't touching one another. They didn't move, they didn't rustle. And not a single sound of insects or birds. I didn't say anything to my companions, I just listened as we got into the car. The road was hard, we climbed up the height for one last look at their place of dwelling, our brothers and fellow prayerful ones. I asked to stop the car, to bow once more from afar. It was important to me to pray for them and ask, even at such a distance, for their blessing once again. I got out and noticed again, I had never in my life, in such wild nature, experienced such silence. There were 3 of us. I asked the other 2, tell me, do you hear any sounds? Maybe I can't hear. They hadn't thought about it either. They listened carefully and were silent. And after some time, they said, no, some kind of unnatural silence. That is the blessing peace that was in the hearts of those hermits. It turns out it influences the surrounding world, the material, non-spiritual world, not only people. What I can do with birds, with trees, with insects, something strange, unnatural, like waves from the stone thrown into the water. They cannot help but make noise. Noise will always be, but this was 100% profound silence. The same as in the hearts of those ascetics. That was, of course, very powerful. That is, I'm not talking about the spiritual insights, but even about the outward consequences of their way of life. But it was very strongly that moment. Therefore, if one asks why Orthodoxy is the truth, one must touch it. Try it. And the best way, well, of course, one of the options is to touch the works of the saints. That is depth. By the mercy of Most High this year, with his long suffering, I will soon be 64. And after that crisis, when I was just past 30, I have never had even a shadow of doubt again, based on the experience in which I live. My experience, unfortunately, is also negative. the experience of my sins, no matter what fault I have, I always endure and feel God's love over me. And I'm always amazed by this. Well, of course, the Lord loves everyone. Of course, He's merciful to all. But with me, He should be stricter. Simple logic says so. But always with extraordinary mercy, with love. And that experience, both personal and from communication with the sincere of very Christian and non-Christian confessions, and the experience of communication with spirit-bearing Orthodox people, and the experience of penetrating into the works of Orthodox saints, left me with no other conclusion. Therefore, today I can say for myself, of course, forgive me in your presence, but nevertheless I can say, I am happy. By God's mercy, thank the Lord that I believe in one holy Catholic Apostolic Church, Orthodox, and I belong to it. And I consider this is the greatest treasure of my life.